The day the divorce papers were finalized, my husband froze all my assets. He must have wanted to see me on the street, but he had no idea that I had spent 8 years meticulously planning to ensure he would be the one left with nothing. You think this is just another predictable story of divorce where the wife is left on the curb, weeping, begging, and enduring endless misery? You are mistaken. This is the story of a trap I patiently wove, thread by thread, for 8 long years. Today, I am springing that trap, and I am about to bury the man who once called himself a king. The day I signed the papers, he was in such a hurry that the moment he left the lawyer's office, he called his private banker and ordered a freeze on every account connected to my name. He wanted to see me kneel, to hear me plead, to watch me tremble at the sight of my empty wallet. He laughed. It was the laugh of a man accustomed to treating his wife like a shadow. He mocked my foolishness, my supposed dependence on him for everything. But he did not know. From the moment I stepped into that home, I had practiced living as if I would one day leave it. I learned to smile when ignored, to be silent when coerced, to nod when controlled. And most importantly, I learned to hide behind a mask of perfect virtue so that when the time was right, I could strike at his heart with absolute precision. My name is Eleanor Vance. Today is the day Richard Sterling and I finalized our divorce at his downtown law firm. Before leaving the penthouse overlooking Central Park, I paused to look around one last time. For 7 years, I had walked on these cold marble floors as if on a sheet of ice. The home was breathtakingly beautiful, but everything gleamed with a sterile light, devoid of warmth. I felt no regret. Instead, a wave of release washed over me. It was a lightness, as if a chain that had been tightening around my neck for years had just been unfastened. Richard Sterling was already sitting in the back of a black Cadillac Escalade. The window was halfway down, as if to maintain a physical distance from me. He wore a tailored gray suit, and a luxury watch glittered on his wrist. His face, once so handsome and proud. Looking at it now, it was nothing more than an empty shell. "What are you standing there for?" he snapped. "Get in the car. I have a meeting at 10. I did not dignify his tone with a response, simply opening the door and sliding in. The air inside the car was so cold a single breath could have frosted the windows. The driver, Arthur, glanced at me in the rearview mirror. That look of pity was all too familiar. Everyone pitied me because they saw a failure. A 32-year-old housewife for 7 years. A woman with no job, no money, no connections. Abandoned when her husband grew tired of her, kicked out of her home to wander the streets. It was the cautionary tale society always told women to keep them in line. The car pulled up in front of the law office. Richard strode ahead, as if afraid he would lose his nerve if he delayed for even a minute. I followed behind him. My footsteps were strangely calm and even. The proceedings were swift, the paperwork stamped and sealed. 2 thick manila envelopes, thin but as heavy as a lifetime spent in a gilded cage. Before I could even reach for my copy, Richard raised an eyebrow and smiled for the first and only time that day. "Eleanor," he said slowly, as if bestowing a great favor. "Since we were married once, I will not let you walk out onto the street completely unprepared." He placed the documents in his briefcase and looked me straight in the eye, as if savoring my every reaction. "I canceled your supplementary credit cards yesterday. I also deactivated all the payment apps on your phone." "Oh, you do not have an income, do you?" "Yes," he smirked. "I even blocked the debit card I used to give you your allowance." I lifted my head, my eyes wide, my expression crumbling as if I were about to collapse. "Richard, what is this?" He seemed pleased. He leaned in and lowered his voice, but every word was a chisel against my ear. "From now on, you will not have a single cent. So I have already had the locks on the penthouse changed, and I told the housekeeper to pack all your things and leave them with the doorman." "Oh, and your parents, living upstate. I hear the bank has been pressuring them about the mortgage they took out against their house to back your brother's business venture 6 months ago." He watched me intently, as if observing a play. "How will you live now? Sleep under a bridge, or go running home to your parents, crying about the good old days?" His voice was laced with a vicious satisfaction. "Get on your knees and beg. Maybe I will give you enough for a month's rent." The paralegal standing nearby glanced up. Her expression was a strange mix of curiosity, disgust, and pity. I felt my hands tremble as I clutched the envelope. My nails dug into my palms, turning the skin white. Richard must have thought I was terrified, but he was wrong. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. "Richard Sterling, you have not changed in 8 years. The habit of stomping on someone's foot and then asking if it hurts, that was all I could think of." I took a deep breath, lowered my head, and let the tears well up at the perfect moment. I was acting out an emotion I had practiced for years. It was easy. "I had to do this," I said, my voice choked with emotion. He sneered. "I had to do this too. This is me, teaching you to face reality. Eleanor Vance. The reality is that you are nothing without me." He waved his hand as if shooing away a fly. "Get out of my sight," he said, turning his back on me. His stiff, retreating back looked like that of a man who had just thrown out a bag of trash and felt relieved. I stood perfectly still, watching the Escalade pull away. As its taillights disappeared around the corner, the victim's expression on my face vanished cleanly, like a mask being removed. I raised a hand and wiped away a single tear. It was a tear of my own making, not one of pain. I opened the handbag I had carried for 5 years and pulled an old, worn phone from a hidden pocket in the lining. It was an old flip phone, so scratched and battered no one would ever look twice at it. I pressed a speed dial number, and before the first ring could finish, the other end picked up. It was a woman's voice, crisp and precise. "Eleanor, how did it go?" "Just as we predicted. He has blocked everything," I said in a calm voice. I looked down at the documents in my hand and curled my lip in the direction Richard had just disappeared. "Very good." I paused for a beat, then spoke as if I were naming a hurricane. "Let's begin. Activate Operation Downfall and notify all relevant parties to proceed in perfect synchronization." I closed the phone and slipped it deep into my bag. Behind me, people still saw a destitute woman thrown out of her home, but I had just pressed the launch button on a shredder. And standing in the middle of it was none other than Richard Sterling. I did not hail a cab after leaving the law office. I walked with deliberate slowness. The New York sky, not yet a deep summer blue, was beating down with a harsh sun. I pulled the brim of my hat down low. I let the sweat trickle down my back, presenting the perfect image of a penniless, newly divorced woman lost in the vast city. The glances I received were a mixture of pity, curiosity, and indifference. I needed all of it. I needed to make this entire city believe I had hit rock bottom. I entered a bus shelter on the corner and sat on a metal bench. When I opened my palm, all that was visible were a few crumpled dollar bills and some loose change. $10, maybe 15 in total. And the coins, perfect props for an empty drama. I deliberately smoothed out the bills so the person next to me could see. A woman selling lottery tickets looked at me and sighed. "Tough breakup, huh, honey?" she asked in a gravelly voice. I nodded, my eyes downcast. "It is hard, but you will get through it." I managed a weak smile and said, "Thank you." I had heard those words of comfort for 7 years. They were the familiar refrains spoken every time Richard humiliated me in front of his family and friends. So familiar that I knew exactly how low to bow my head to avoid further questions. The bus arrived. I paid in cash and took a seat in the back. The smell of people, exhaust, and the city mingled in the air. A timeline lit up in my mind like traffic signals. The moment Richard froze my accounts, a clock started ticking. In 3 hours, his company's finance team would receive a liquidity report. In 6 hours, a major client in New Jersey would call about a disruption in cash flow. Within 24 hours, rumors would begin to circulate among his investors. I did not need to hurry. I just needed to be on time. The bus stopped at the end of the line. I got off, pulling a battered old suitcase I had packed a week ago. My worldly possessions consisted of a few pairs of plain shoes and some paperback books. I walked into a narrow side street. Flashing signs, grimy restaurants, auto repair shops, and cramped rooming houses were packed together. This was what people called the forgotten part of the city. It was crowded and loud, but it offered anonymity. Anonymity was exactly what I needed. My room was on the 2nd floor. The stairs were narrow and the steps rusted. The landlady opened the door and looked me up and down. "You alone?" "Yes." I had paid a month's deposit for a room with a shared bathroom. I nodded and handed her the cash. The landlady glanced at the crumpled bills, sighed, and said, "All right. Let me know if you need anything." The door creaked. The room was bare except for a metal frame bed, an old fan, and a single yellowed light bulb. I set down my suitcase and sat on the edge of the bed. I could hear the sounds of the city from the street below. I sat still for a good 10 minutes. This was enough time for anyone who might be watching to report that I had checked into a shabby boarding house. I took another phone from the bottom of my suitcase. A slim smartphone, fully charged, strong signal. I called Sarah, one of the two people who knew the full architecture of my plan. "Report. He blocked everything just as you predicted, sis. But do not worry. The reserve accounts under the Shell Corporation are still active. The funds are secure. Good. The business partner in New Jersey just emailed me about this week's payment. Do not reply. Let him worry." I ended the call. To rush now would be fatal. That evening, I bought a $5 sandwich from a bodega at the entrance to the alley. I paid with change. The owner looked at me with pity and threw in an extra bag of chips. I went back to my room and ate slowly. I left the window open so the streetlight cast a yellow glow inside. I needed these small details to build the narrative of poverty. A cheap sandwich, a yellow light, a photo of peeling wallpaper. All of it would be used at the right time and in the right place. At 9 p.m., the old flip phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "I heard you have been reduced to living on the streets." I knew who it was. Jessica, the wife of Richard's close business partner, a woman who thrived on gossip. I replied with a short message. "Yes, I just found a place." The 3 dots of her typing bubble appeared for a long time. "Richard is so heartless." I did not reply. My silence would be interpreted in my favor. At 11 sharp, I turned off the light and lay down on the iron bed. The fan creaked overhead. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I opened an invisible ledger from 8 years ago. Richard, the man I had first married, had handed me his credit card and spoken to me as if he were doing me a charity. He said, "Buy whatever the house needs, just let me know," and I had whispered a quiet thank you. From that day on, I saved a few dollars from every grocery run, a few dozen every month, and hundreds every year. I documented my savings, and at night, I taught myself to read financial statements. While he slept, I opened an account in my friend Sarah's name and learned to invest, slowly and steadily. I was not aiming for a jackpot, I was playing the long game. A small noise in the hallway brought me back to the present. Someone had just walked by. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. I was not afraid. I had left my greatest fear in that penthouse by the park, along with Richard Sterling's laughter. The next morning, I woke early. I put on an old t-shirt and black pants, my hair tied back in a simple ponytail. I went to a small cafe at the entrance of the alley and ordered the cheapest iced Americano. I sat in a corner, took out a thin notebook, and doodled a few lines. From the outside, I looked like an unemployed woman sketching aimlessly. No one knew I was mapping the cash flow of a company on the verge of collapse. My phone vibrated. It was Sarah. Second call from the New Jersey partner. His tone is getting more agitated. Good. The bank will send the reminder notice on schedule. Understood. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. Richard hated bitterness. He liked things sweet and easy to swallow. That was his weakness. A call came from an unknown number. I answered. "Eleanor Vance." "Yes. Is this a good time?" "Our firm has an opening for an administrative position. It is not fast-paced, but it is stable." I was silent for 2 seconds. Then I replied in a voice mixed with gratitude and anxiety. "Thank you. Could I have some time to think about it?" "Of course. Take your time." I hung up. I knew this was the first hook. A small, fragrant piece of bait thrown out to see if I was truly starving. I would take it, but not yet. In the afternoon, I returned to my room, changed clothes, and walked to a bus stop. I stood there for a long time, watching people come and go. I needed more proof that I had nowhere to go. I shed a few tears at just the right moment. That evening, I received a text from Richard, just one line, "Have you thought it over?" I stared at the screen and smiled faintly. I replied, "Give me more time." 3 minutes later, he responded, "Do not test my patience." I turned off the phone. His patience was the most fragile thing in the world. I knew that. That night, I turned on my slim smartphone and sent a short email. There was no subject line. I simply attached a single file, a risk analysis report for a real estate project near an industrial park. It was an analysis I had prepared long ago. The recipient was an address I had memorized for 2 years but had never used. After sending it, I shut down the phone. The first winds had begun to blow, and tomorrow morning, the sky over Richard Sterling would begin to change color. On the third morning after the divorce, I woke before dawn. The cramped room was filled with the smell of stale smoke and the previous night's rain. I got up, opened the window, and took a deep breath. There was something raw and real in the pre-dawn air of that poor alley. It reminded me of how far a person could fall if they lost their grip. I washed my face with cold water and looked at myself in the small mirror on the wall. The mirror was cloudy, but the eyes in it were clear. There was a stillness, not joy, not resentment, just the focus of a tightrope walker. I had to maintain this rhythm. Every step had to be precise. I put on an old shirt, grabbed a canvas bag, and went out to the entrance of the alley. The bagel cart had just opened, so I bought the cheapest one and paid with cash. The owner gave me an extra cream cheese and said, "This will help with the blues, dear." I nodded. What I needed was not comfort, but words like these, words that allowed the story to spread organically. In these alleys, rumors traveled faster than newspapers. I went to the same cafe as yesterday and sat in the same seat. I opened my notebook, wrote a few random lines, then erased them. In reality, I was waiting for a call, and it came right on time. It was Sarah. The bank sent the debt collection notice. Good. Send him a courtesy reminder, but send it late, just before closing time. I just received another text from the New Jersey partner. If it is 2 more days late, they are going to revise the contract. Perfect. Do not reply. I hung up and took a sip of coffee. I imagined Richard sitting in a glass-walled conference room, tapping his fingers on the table, his voice a little louder than usual. He hated situations beyond his control, and I was slowly eroding that very control. Around 10 a.m., the call from yesterday came again. It was about the administrative position. "If you are interested, you could come in this afternoon to talk." I paused for 2 seconds before replying, "Yes, that would be fine, thank you." I recognized this was not a job, but a mirror. They wanted to see if I had any pride left. I would show them that I was desperate, but not debased. That afternoon, I went to a nondescript office building in Midtown South. The lobby was small, the elevator old. The interviewer was a middle-aged man with a flat voice. He nodded, looking at my empty resume. "It has been a while since you have worked." "Yes, I was a homemaker, and now you are divorced." I lowered my head. "Yes." He looked at me more closely, as if sizing me up. "It is not much, but it is repetitive work. Are you okay with that?" I nodded. Quickly enough to show desperation, but slowly enough not to seem too eager. "I need stability," he smiled. It was the smile of a man who thinks he is holding the scales of justice. "All right, we will be in touch." Leaving the building, I paused for a few minutes. I knew someone would report to Richard that I was looking for a low-wage job, willing to take anything. I needed him to believe that. On the way back, I stopped at an old phone shop and bought a cheap SIM card. The owner barely looked up as he took my cash and slid it over the counter. I needed another layer of anonymous communication. I returned to my room, locked the door, sat on the bed, and turned on my slim phone. There was a reply from the email address I had sent the file to the night before. No subject, just one line. "Meet me tomorrow morning at the park by the river." I stared at the sentence. My heartbeat remained steady. He had taken the bait, but big fish always put up a fight. I had to be prepared. That evening, Richard called. I answered on the third ring. "What have you been doing, Eleanor?" His voice was starting to sound strained. I was silent for a moment. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "I am getting debt notices from the bank. Business partners are calling nonstop. What have you been saying out there? I gave a weak, trembling laugh. I have not said anything. I do not know anything about your business, Richard. He grew agitated. Do not play innocent. I know you are not as simple as you look. I swallowed audibly. You are giving me too much credit. Silence. I could hear his breathing through the phone. Eleanor Vance. He said my name slowly. I will give you one more chance. If you cooperate, I can offer you some support. Support. The word he had used to define me for 7 years. I closed my eyes. The image of the nights I spent poring over his ledgers in the kitchen flashed in my mind. I need time to think. I do not have much patience. I know. I hung up first. It was a small thing, but it was enough to unsettle him. That night, I repacked my suitcase. I chose my simplest, neatest, but most understated outfit. I had to look the part of a down-on-her-luck divorcee. No jewelry or flashy details, my old phone in an outer pocket, the slim one in an inner pocket. The next morning, I arrived at Central Park 15 minutes early. The sky was clear, the air crisp. A man was sitting on a bench with his back to me. He had a distinguished posture, wearing a simple white shirt and dark trousers. As I approached, he turned. His eyes were sharp, but not unkind. Miss Eleanor Vance? Yes, I am Marcus Thorne. I sat on the bench across from him. There were no handshakes or pleasantries. Your analysis report was interesting. He got straight to the point. Where did you get your data? From my own experience. He frowned. Do you know who you are dealing with? I do. And what do you want? I looked him straight in the eye. For the truth to be documented, and I need a legally defensible position. He gave a short, dry laugh. And you think I will just believe you? You do not have to believe me now. Just verify it. I took a slim folder of documents from my bag and placed them on the table between us. These are the irregularities in the last quarterly financial statement. These are the legal liabilities of the real estate project in question. And this, I paused. This is the cash flow he thought no one was looking at. Marcus Thorne quietly flipped through the pages. The wind rustled the edges of the paper. Time seemed to pass very slowly. Finally, he looked up. You are calmer than I expected. I have been waiting a long time. He nodded. Good. I will have my people look into this. But you should know, once we start, there is no going back. I smiled. From the day he froze my accounts, there was no going back for me. We stood up. He handed me his business card. Wait for my call. I took it. I did not look at it. I knew the game had just moved to a whole new level. On the way back, my old phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I hear you have been meeting strange men. I did not reply. I looked up at the sky. Clouds were gathering on the horizon. The wind was changing, and Richard Sterling, unknowingly, was standing in the eye of the storm. By the time I left the park, the sun was getting harsher. The light reflecting off the reservoir was like a thin blade. Marcus Thorne's business card was tucked neatly in my pocket, a quiet token of a new front opening. I did not rush to call Sarah. Sometimes, silence is the best way to maintain balance. I walked along the park path, blending in with the morning joggers and tourists. Elderly women walked their dogs, children rode bikes, middle-aged men ran at a leisurely pace. No one looked at me twice. I loved this feeling of invisibility in a crowd. It allowed me to be completely inside my own head. Returning to my room, I locked the door and drew the curtains. I laid both phones on the table and organized my papers. Every stack had a purpose. I did not allow myself emotion. Emotion was a rare luxury, reserved for the late hours when I was truly alone. During the day, I was an operator. At 11 a.m., I got a call from Sarah. Marcus Thorne's people have started their due diligence. They have requested 2 more documents. Send them what I prepared. Nothing more, nothing less. One more thing. Sarah lowered her voice. Mr. Sterling just ended an internal meeting and got so angry he slammed his fist on the table. I smiled. It was a natural reaction. He always masked his fear with shows of force. I ended the call and turned on my old laptop. The screen was a bit dim, but it was good enough for writing. I logged into my anonymous email account and checked for a reply. Nothing new. I knew men like Marcus Thorne would not respond hastily. They needed time to confirm I was not just a reckless amateur. For lunch, I went down to the diner in the alley. The owner asked, "What will it be today?" "Same as yesterday." She nodded and served me my food. A man at the next table was talking loudly on his phone about loans and repayments. I found it distracting and tried to block it out. At this stage, such talk only reminded me of Richard's heavy breathing. After eating, I went back to my room and rested for a while. I needed to conserve my energy. The afternoon would be difficult. Around 3 p.m., my old phone rang. It was a text from Richard. "What are you doing?" I read it without replying. 5 minutes later, he called. I let it ring twice before answering. "I am out," I said, my voice weary. "Where?" "Looking for work." He scoffed. "Doing what?" "Anything that pays." He was silent for a few seconds. I could hear the sound of his breathing clearly. "I think I can live on that little money. I do not have a choice." I managed a choked sound, almost a sob. "Do not make this harder for me," he sighed, his tone softening. "Let us talk when you get back. I can give you some money. Not a lot, but enough." "How much?" I asked, not out of need, but to test him. $25,000. I closed my eyes. 25,000. The amount he once spent on a single night out with his friends. "I will think about it. Do not keep me waiting." "I know." I hung up. My hand was not shaking. I knew he was losing patience, and impatience inevitably leads to mistakes. A moment later, I received a text from Sarah. "He just had his legal team start a review of your shared assets. There is nothing I can do to force their hand. He is getting suspicious of you." Suspicion. I got up and opened the window. The sky was turning gray. The clouds were getting thicker. I liked afternoons like this. They made things feel heavy and slick. In the evening, I received an email from Marcus Thorne. Just one line. "Be at my office at 8:30 tomorrow morning." I replied with a concise, "Understood." I knew this was the second stage of verification. If I passed, I would officially step into a different arena, one where law, money, and power communicated in a cold language. That night, I prepared meticulously. I did not bring too many papers, only the most essential. I had to show that I knew where to draw the line. The next morning, I wore a simple white shirt, black trousers, and flat shoes. I arrived at Thorne's office in a downtown skyscraper on time. The building was tall, the lobby spacious, and filled with white light. I went to the reception desk and gave my name. An assistant led me to a small meeting room. Marcus Thorne arrived 5 minutes after me. He placed a stack of documents on the table. "We have conducted a preliminary investigation, and the issues are not small." He looked at me. There was no more suspicion in his eyes. "What do you need from us?" "I need the truth recorded through official channels." "You know this will trigger a counterattack, do you not?" "I am prepared." Marcus Thorne nodded. "Good. We will proceed with a full investigation. You are to have no direct contact with the subject during this time." "Understood." "One more thing," he added. "You need a better cover. A legal footing." "I see. Can you arrange that for me?" "I can. But you have to prove you are worth it." I smiled. "I have been doing that for 8 years. He stood up and held out his hand. This time, I shook it. It was a brief, firm handshake. As I was leaving the building, I received a text from Richard. "I am coming to see you tonight." I stared at the message. I could feel his loss of control in every letter. I replied, "I am not comfortable with that. You are avoiding me. I am just tired." The typing bubble appeared for a long time. "I will find you." I turned off the screen. I knew he would try, and I knew that every move he made would leave a trail. I returned to my room and packed a small overnight bag, not to run, but to prepare. I looked around the cramped room. Suddenly, it did not feel like a temporary shelter anymore. It was a way station, a place I had stood while everything else was falling apart. Outside, it began to rain. Heavy drops fell in a sudden downpour. I sat on the bed, opened my notebook, and wrote one line. "The next phase has begun." I underlined it. This rain is not just going to wet the streets. The light rain lingered all day. I sat with my back against the wall, listening to the drumming on the tin roof. It felt like a steady rhythm for the thoughts in my head. Richard said he would come find me. I believed him. He was not used to being denied, especially by me. Around 11 p.m, my old phone rang. I knew who it was without looking. I let it ring 6 times before answering. "Where are you?" His voice was low but tense, like a string pulled too tight. "I am resting." "You?" "In a rented room." "The address." I was silent, just long enough for him to think I was scared. "Eleanor," he growled, "do not play games with me. What do you want? Let us talk. We are divorced. Just because we are divorced does not mean you can interfere with my business." I let out a soft laugh, almost inaudible over the phone. "I do not have that kind of power." He was silent. I could hear his breathing mingled with the rain. "I am close by," he said. "Open the door." I stood up, walked to the window, and peered down into the alley. A black sedan was parked at the entrance. Its lights were off. I knew he would not be able to get in. This neighborhood was different from the ones he was used to. "It is not a comfortable place. I do not need your opinion. Go back." I said each word slowly and clearly. "Coming here will only make things worse. Are you threatening me?" "No, I am just advising you." I hung up. My hand was a little clammy, but not shaking. From that moment, I knew he was about to start acting foolishly. The next morning, Sarah called very early. He had people asking around the area. Someone even mentioned seeing his car at the entrance to the alley last night. Let him act recklessly. I had a cold bagel for breakfast. I chewed slowly, looking out at the alley where people were starting to gather. Life here went on as usual. In the distance, the storm was brewing. A call from the bank came around 9 a.m. "Miss Vance, we need to re-verify some information regarding your family's mortgage." "Yes," I responded with a hint of anxiety. "Is there a problem? The guarantor has requested additional paperwork." I knew who the guarantor was. It was Richard. "I will prepare it," I said, and hung up. I texted Sarah. "He is starting to use my family. Should I intervene?" "No, wait." At lunchtime, I received an email from the HR department of the company where I had interviewed. "Miss Vance, you have been offered the position, starting next week." I stared at the message, thought for a few seconds, then replied, "Thank you. I will be there. I did not need this job for the money." It was the perfect piece to complete the picture of a fallen woman desperately clinging to a lifeline. That afternoon, I went to Marcus Thorne's office for a brief meeting. This time, it was not a conference room, but his smaller private office. He handed me a folder. It was the result of the second due diligence report. I looked through the numbers and the red-inked notes. Everything was just as I had predicted. "He still does not know, does he?" I asked. "Not yet, but he will soon." "Good." Marcus looked at me and said quietly, "You need to be prepared. When this information gets out, he will use every means possible to retaliate. That includes your family." "I am ready." He nodded. "We will maintain our distance until the right moment. You continue to live your life." "I am good at that." Just as I left his office, I received a text from Richard. "You think you have won." I did not reply. I knew my silence would unnerve him more than any words. That night, I returned to my room, changed, and lay on the bed. My phone rang incessantly. I turned it off. I needed to sleep. Tomorrow would be a long day. The next morning, I arrived at my new job early. The office was small, the work simple. I was diligent and obedient. I wanted everyone to remember me as a kind, hard-working woman. Mid-morning, I received a text from an unknown number. "How much more do you think you can hide?" I knew it was Richard. "He was using another SIM card," I replied. "This scares me." A typing bubble appeared. "You should be scared." I put the phone down and took a deep breath. I could feel the net tightening. But I was not the one in the middle of it. I was on the outside, pulling the strings. In the afternoon, Sarah called. "He just made an unusual transfer." "Where to?" "To a fixer, very rushed." I closed my eyes. He was digging his own grave. Should I stop him? No, let him be. In the evening, I received a call from my mother. Her voice was full of worry. "Eleanor, a man from the bank came by and asked some questions." What is going on? Mom, do not worry. I am handling it. Are you okay? I bit my lip. I am fine. After hanging up, I sat for a long time. This was the only moment of the day I allowed myself to feel tired. But tired did not mean giving up. That night, I wrote another line in my notebook. The enemy is beginning to lose financial control. I underlined it. A car engine revved outside and then stopped. I looked out the window. A familiar black sedan idled at the entrance to the alley. It did not stay long. Richard was on the run. And I was waiting. I must have fallen asleep before my alarm went off. The room was quiet except for the steady whir of the fan. I got up and my feet touched the cold linoleum floor. I could feel my own heartbeat. It was the steady pulse of someone used to waiting, neither fast nor slow. I made a cup of instant coffee and sipped it slowly, leaning against the windowsill. Down in the alley, vendors were setting up, and the squeak of iron gates being opened filled the air. A new day had begun, and for Richard Sterling, it was another day closer to the edge. I arrived at work earlier than usual. I had to create an image of stability and consistency. The new employee, recently divorced. A hard worker who never complained. I turned on my computer and organized documents. The work was not difficult, but I handled it with meticulous care. This diligence would become my shield. Around 9 a.m., my phone vibrated. He just signed a short-term loan agreement. The interest rate is predatory. How much? Nearly $20 million. I closed my eyes for a moment. In his situation, that amount of money was poison. Let it go. What did he use for collateral? Shares in a subsidiary company. All right. I hung up and opened an Excel spreadsheet. I added a week to the timeline. When someone starts using shares to cover a cash deficit, they are at risk of losing control. Richard was sliding down a very slippery slope. Marcus Thorne called while I was at my desk. Can you talk for a moment? Yes, we have found 2 more anomalies. We are sending a formal letter requesting a more thorough investigation. When? By the end of the week. Someone will serve him the papers before the letter arrives. I smiled. That was more than enough. Marcus hesitated. Are you okay? I am fine. Your family is fine. I told you I had it covered. He let out a small sigh. Good. We will support you from behind the scenes. After the call, I turned back to my computer screen. My hands were steady. Everything was proceeding according to plan. I had lunch with my colleagues in the office break room. They talked about their children, living expenses, and rent. I listened, nodding occasionally. I did not share my story. There was no need. The fewer people who knew, the safer I felt. That afternoon, Richard called. I looked at the screen, hesitated for a second, then answered. Where are you? At work. At work? Yes, I am working. He gave a hollow laugh. Doing what? Whatever they do in that little office. I need to see you. It is difficult. You are avoiding me. I am not avoiding you. Then see me. Calm down. My voice was soft, not challenging. Calm down? He snarled. You are destroying me. I was silent. Eleanor, he lowered his voice. How much do you want? I closed my eyes. This was the question I had been waiting for. I am not for sale. I will give you $500,000. No, $1 million. I smiled faintly. Remember, everything has a price. Do not gloat. I am not gloating. I am just tired. I hung up before he could reply. Texts immediately started flooding in. I did not read them. I turned off the screen. After work, I did not go straight to my room. I took a bus upstate to visit my parents. I had to see them. I had to make sure they were safe. My father was sitting on the porch. He looked thinner than before. My mother stood up from where she was chopping vegetables when she saw me. Her eyes were red. You are here. Yes. We sat down. I omitted some details so they would not worry, telling them only what was necessary. Take care of yourself, my father said. I know what he is capable of. My mother took my hand. If anything happens, you come here. I nodded. I did not say that I could not retreat, not even for them. That night, I returned to my room. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. Rumors are circulating that his company is under an informal audit. He knows. Good. I opened my notebook and wrote another line. Panic is beginning to set in. I underlined it twice. That night, I did not fall asleep right away. Sitting on my bed, I heard the sound of a car in the alley. A knock on my door came as a motorcycle passed by. I got up without turning on the light. Who is it? Eleanor. Open the door. It was Richard's voice. He was very close. I stood still. Go back. Open the door. You are scaring me. Do not go. I took out my phone and dialed a pre-saved number. There was no need to call. Just having the screen lit up was enough. If you do not leave, I am calling the police. Silence. 1 beat, 2 beats. You would not dare. I dare, I said, slowly and clearly. I heard a ragged breath from outside the door, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps. I heard a car engine start and speed away. I sank onto the bed. My hands were a little cold, but my mind was clear. I knew he had just crossed a line, and every time he did, the evidence became clearer. The next morning, vague articles about cash flow problems in real estate development firms started appearing on online news sites. No names were mentioned, but those in the industry already knew. His phone kept ringing, but no one answered. I knew Richard was no longer in control. He would react, and panicked reactions always reveal weaknesses. I closed my notebook and got ready for work. Before leaving, I glanced around the small room one last time. I had been here, on the edge of the abyss. Now it was time for me to move forward. That morning, I left my room with a distinct feeling that there was no turning back. Not out of fear, but because everything had passed the point of no return. The alley was the same. Still noisy and dusty, people still laughed, haggled, and lived their ordinary lives. I blended in, keeping my expression as neutral as possible. Inside, however, things were beginning to spin faster. I arrived at work on time. Less than 10 minutes after turning on my computer, the office started to buzz. A colleague whispered to me, "Did you hear the news?" "What news?" "A big real estate company is apparently under investigation. The higher-ups are in chaos." I looked up and feigned ignorance. "Really?" "Yeah. A friend at a bank said there is a major cash flow problem." I nodded without saying anything. The fact that the rumor had reached this low level meant the panic upstairs was growing. Around 10 a.m., my old phone rang. It was Sarah. He just called an emergency meeting with his lawyers. "What did he ask?" "About you." I smiled. "What is going on?" He asked. "Who you have been talking to? Who is on your side?" No one answered. I hung up. I knew Richard was searching every corner of his memory, looking for someone I could have leaned on. But for 8 years, I had perfected the art of making myself seem like a person with no one. I ate lunch alone. I needed space to think. Marcus Thorne had said that rumors travel faster than documents. And when the documents arrived, it would not be a single blow, but a chain reaction. I had to be careful not to get caught in the vortex too soon. At exactly 2 p.m., I received an internal email. It was a notification for a short training session on financial protocols. I signed up immediately. I had to be present at certain official places and leave a clear trail of my work. During the training, his phone kept ringing. It was an unknown number. I did not answer. Then a text came. "You think you are so clever." I did not reply. Another text came immediately. "Do not provoke me." I placed the phone face down on the table. I knew he was trying to drag me into an emotional conversation. I would not engage. As soon as I walked out of the building after work, I saw a familiar black sedan parked across the street. My heart skipped a beat, but my face remained calm. I did not look in that direction and just kept walking. The car door opened. Richard called my name from across the street. Ignoring the stares of passers-by, I stopped and turned. "What are you doing here? Get in the car." He came closer, blocking my path. His face was more gaunt, his eyes bloodshot, his collar askew. "Come with me. I do not want to make a scene." "You are the one making a scene," I said, just loud enough for him to hear. "Go back. You think this little act of yours can fool me? I do not know what you are talking about." He laughed, but it was a twisted smile. "Who did you meet? What did you send them?" I looked him straight in the eye. "You are scared, are you not?" A second of silence. I saw the flicker in his eyes. "I am not scared," he snarled. "You are scared," I repeated calmly. "That is why you are here." He reached out and grabbed my wrist. The grip was not strong, but it was enough for me to feel his loss of control. I said, "Get in the car! Let go of me!" I repeated, louder. People around us started to stare. A security guard approached. "Is everything all right here?" Richard hesitated. I seized the opportunity to pull my hand away. "It is nothing," I told the guard. "Just a misunderstanding with someone I know." The guard nodded at us, but his eyes remained wary. Richard took a step back. "I will let this go. It does not matter whether you let it go or not. You are going to regret this." I looked at him slowly. "You have said that before." I turned and walked away. This time, he did not follow me. I returned to my room, locked the door, and leaned against it for a few seconds. Not out of fear, but because I needed to confirm one thing. He had left a trail in front of witnesses. I turned on my phone and sent a short text to Marcus Thorne. The subject approached me in public and applied pressure. He replied in less than 10 minutes. "It has been documented." That evening, Sarah called. "He is trying to secure more loans, but he has been rejected by several lenders. The rumors are starting to damage his profile." "Good. I am not worried he will do something drastic." I was silent for a moment. "I am worried. That is why we need to be faster." At night, I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. The image of Richard, standing there unraveled, flashed in my mind. The man who I once believed held everything together was now being consumed by his own panic. I opened my notebook and continued writing. "The enemy is making direct contact and public mistakes." I underlined it 3 times. Outside, the wind blew hard, rattling the window pane. I pulled the blanket up and closed my eyes. The documents would arrive tomorrow, and when they did, it would no longer be a rumor. The next morning, I woke up very early. Not because I had not slept, but because my body was now accustomed to being one step ahead. The weak morning light filtered through the window of my room, illuminating the small desk covered in notes. I made coffee and sipped it slowly, rereading everything I had written over the past few months. Every timeline was precise, with no room for error. It gave me a strange sense of calm. I arrived at work earlier than usual. The atmosphere today was different. People were gathered in small groups, talking in low voices or staring at their computers, but their eyes kept darting around. Around 9 a.m., all employees were instructed to remain at their desks. An internal email had been sent requesting full cooperation with an audit team for the day. A heavy silence fell over the office. I could hear nervous breathing and the scraping of chairs. Some people stood up in panic and then sat back down. I did not. I had been waiting for this moment for a long time. About 15 minutes later, a group of people walked in. They wore dark suits and had prominent ID badges on their chests. No one said much, but their presence silenced the entire floor. They went straight to the executive office area and closed the glass doors behind them. I kept my head down and continued my work as usual. Around noon, I received a text from Sarah. "It has begun," I replied with a short, "as planned." She sent back a single circle emoji. I understood. No one was in the mood for lunch that day. I ate the sandwich I had brought as usual. I chewed slowly. Instead of excitement, I felt a familiar emptiness. When a goal is within reach, the thrill disappears. Only composure remains. As the afternoon began, my phone rang. It was Richard's number. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. "What did you do?" His voice was hoarse, the usual threat gone. "I am at work." "You think you have won?" "I am not playing a game of winning and losing." He growled, then laughed. "Do not act so high and mighty. You brought this on yourself." "You brought this on yourself," I said. A long silence followed. I thought the law would be enough. I thought the savages could kill me. His ragged breathing was clear over the call. "What do you want?" I closed my eyes for a moment. "I want you to stop. Do not involve my family." "You think I have anything left to lose?" "You do," I said quietly. "Your last shred of pride." He laughed, but the sound was broken. "You were always the moral one." "No," I replied. I am just different from you. I hung up before he could say anything else. By late afternoon, information started to leak. A few financial news sites published short, cautious articles stating that an investigation into allegations was underway, but it was enough for those in the industry. At the end of the day, I was summoned to the HR department. It was not just me, but the entire department. They announced a temporary halt to some projects and asked for employees to cooperate by providing information if needed. I signed the confirmation form. My handwriting was steady. When I was leaving the building, Richard was standing in the parking lot. He looked like he had been through a serious illness. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes kept twitching. "Let us talk," he said. "Not here. I am afraid. I do not want you to cause a scene." He laughed, but only for a moment. "I have lost everything. You still have the right to cooperate. Easy for you to say." He came closer. "Do you know what I used to think? I do not care. I thought I would be lost after the divorce." I looked at him for a long time. "You were wrong. You never loved me." "I did love you," I said. "But love does not mean infinite patience." He staggered back and leaned against his car. "I do not understand." "You do not have to," I replied. "Just take responsibility." Someone from his legal team approached him and said something. Richard nodded and looked back at me. "You will not be comfortable either. You will not be comfortable either," I said. He got into his car and slammed the door. That evening, I did not go back to my room. I went to Sarah's apartment. She opened the door and hugged me tightly. "Are you okay, Elle?" "I am fine. He has been summoned again." "I know." We sat on the floor and ate instant noodles. The city lights outside the balcony were dazzling. Sarah looked at me for a long time. I thought about it for a while, and then I regretted it. "No, I am tired." "Yeah. But why do you keep going?" I took a sip of water. "If I do not do it now, I will be tired for the rest of my life." That night, I slept very deeply. The next morning, the news officially broke. It was no longer vague. Richard Sterling's name was mentioned along with several projects linked to corruption. The comment sections exploded. Some expressed sympathy, others schadenfreude. I did not read them. Later, I received a text from Marcus Thorne. "Phase 1 is complete," I replied. "Proceed to the next phase." In the afternoon, I met with my lawyer. He showed me the documents and explained the next steps. Everything was being handled within the legal framework, with no room for emotion. On the way back, I stopped in front of an elevator mirror. The woman in the reflection looked completely different from 8 years ago. Not harder, but clearer. That evening I called my mother. "Mom, have you had dinner?" "Yes, I have." "Do not worry. Has anyone been bothering you?" "No, I am fine." I was silent for a few seconds. "I am sorry for making you worry." "I am glad you are okay." I hung up and sat by the window. The wind was light, the city was still noisy, and life went on. I opened my notebook and wrote the last line of the day. "The enemy is beginning to collapse from within." I underlined it. This was not the end. It was just the moment when everything was exposed, and when the lights came on, no secret could last long. The night after the news broke, the city remained unchanged. Only the invisible currents beneath it churned more violently. I woke up early, washed my face with cold water, and looked in the mirror. The excitement of the first day, when everything exploded, was gone, replaced by a sharp, cold calm. At this stage, it is easy to make mistakes, because people often assume that those who have fallen will never get back up. I knew that Richard Sterling had not given up yet. He was never the type to quietly admit defeat. I went to the lawyer's office as scheduled. Mr. Davis, a former judge recommended by Marcus Thorne, was a man of few words, but each one was concise and weighty. He handed me a thick stack of documents. "We will proceed step by step." He said, "You do not need to speak much. Let the papers do the talking." "What about his attempts to use our history together?" I asked. "He is trying to change the narrative, but the asset freeze and the pressure he applied after the divorce will work in your favor." I nodded. I needed to win definitively, not quickly. As I left the lawyer's office, I received a text from Sarah. He was summoned for a second time. There are some unusual cash expenditures. Document everything. Something else is happening. Sarah hesitated. He called me. He asked me about you. What did you have on him? I smiled. What did you say? I told him I did not know. Good job. I ate lunch alone. I skimmed a few articles. Richard Sterling's name appeared more frequently, followed by speculation and analysis. I paid no attention to the outside commentary. I focused only on my documents and my schedule. In the early afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. Miss Eleanor Vance? Yes, my name is Mark. I am an old friend of Richard's. I was silent for a second. What is this about? I need to talk to you. About what? About Richard. He is in a very bad place right now. I looked out the window. That is no longer my concern. I know. Mark sighed. But we were still a couple. What do you want? A moment of silence passed. He says he will compensate you if you withdraw the complaint. I let out a soft laugh. Say that again, I said slowly. I will not be swayed by compensation. Eleanor, you do not know what he might do. I am prepared. I hung up. I knew these calls would continue. People would try to use stereotypes, pity, and social pressure. I had come too far to turn back for any of that. I returned to my room late that evening. I had not moved out yet. I needed more time to quietly tie up loose ends. A thin envelope was in front of my door. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. It was Richard's handwriting. Let us talk one last time. I crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. The last time is a concept for those who still hold on to hope. That was not me. That night, I received a call from my father. Someone came by asking for you. Who was it? He said he was a friend of your ex-husband. What did you say, Dad? I told him you were not here. I closed my eyes. You did well. Be careful. I know. After hanging up, I called Marcus Thorne. He is starting to use third parties. I expected that, he replied. We have protections in place. Thank you. Remember, he added. No direct contact, please. I will not. The next morning, I went to work early. As soon as I sat down, HR called me. They said the investigation team had a few more questions for me. I nodded and followed them into a room. 2 men were sitting there. Their voices were calm. Miss Vance, you are the ex-wife of Richard Sterling, correct? Yes. Were you aware of his personal finances? I was not involved. When did your marriage end? Recently. They took notes and asked a few more questions. I answered truthfully, without adding or subtracting anything. The truth, when spoken at the right time, is a powerful weapon. Leaving the room, I took a deep breath, not out of fear, but because I knew things had moved into a different dimension. No more rumors or vague threats, only documents and the law remained. In the afternoon, Sarah called. Her voice was small. He has been taken in for questioning. I was silent. Did you hear me, Elle? Yes. It is okay. It is okay. I stood up and went out to the small balcony of the office. The sky was cloudy, but it was not raining. That night, I returned to my room and packed my bags. I did not need to stay here any longer. I had served my purpose. I looked around the room, running my hand over the peeling walls. This was the place that had witnessed me rise from nothing. I closed the door and pulled my suitcase outside. I temporarily moved into Sarah's small apartment. As she drove me, she said, "Sis, I think we are almost done." "No," I replied. "We are only halfway there. What is left?" Facing each other. That night, I received a call from my lawyer, Mr. Davis. They are offering a settlement tomorrow. They are asking to ease the terms. I said that my position is no settlement. Please proceed as planned. The lawyer was silent for a moment. Understood. I hung up and sat by the window. I could see the city lights in the distance. I was not happy, nor was I sad. I just felt that I was on the right path. I opened my notebook and wrote another line. There, I seek an escape, but it is not allowed. I underlined it. Tomorrow, I will face the past. The morning of the day I had to face it, not to hold on to it, but to close it, came sooner than I expected. I woke up while the city was still hazy. I sat on the steps of Sarah's apartment and looked at the skyscrapers shrouded in a thin mist. Before, just the thought of seeing Richard again would have made my heart pound, but not this morning. My wife was as quiet as a sheet of paper, as flat as a lake where the sediment has settled. Lawyer Davis called. At 7 a.m. I will meet you at my office at 9. The other party has confirmed their attendance. Yes, remember, he added. Do not answer if I do not give you the go-ahead. I understand. I hung up and got dressed. The outfit I chose was a neutral color, not flashy, neat, and professional. I did not want to stand out or appear weak. I just needed to present myself as a person leaving a marriage and protecting my legal rights as I saw fit. On the way to the lawyer's office, I received a text from an unknown number. Eleanor, it is me. I did not reply. When the car stopped in front of the building, I took a deep breath. I had imagined this moment countless times, but the reality was different. There was no thunder, no pounding heart, just the sound of my footsteps on the cold stone floor. The mediation room was on the 5th floor. When I entered, Richard was already seated. He looked noticeably thinner, his eyes no longer sharp, but he was still trying to maintain a faded sense of confidence. Next to him was a young, tense-faced lawyer. Richard looked at me for a long time. You are here. I nodded without answering. I sat down next to my lawyer. Lawyer Davis spread out a stack of documents for the record. He calmly opened them. The mediation session began with dry, familiar legal jargon. I listened and answered the questions. Richard was not like that. He kept interrupting and trying to inject emotion into the story. She was well aware of the company's situation, he said. She was not an uninvolved party. Lawyer Davis looked at him intently. Present your evidence. Richard hesitated. I am stating the facts. Facts require evidence, the lawyer replied. I looked at Richard. In that moment, I felt his powerlessness. Not because he was about to lose, but because for the first time, he could not overwhelm his opponent with just his words. It was my turn. The mediator addressed me. What do you want from this mediation? I asked. I want things to be resolved according to the law. I replied. Nothing more, nothing less. If the other side shows sincerity, are you willing to concede some of your demands? I shook my head. The room was silent. Richard turned to me. Do you really want to push me into a corner? I looked at him calmly. You walked into it yourself. The opposing lawyer whispered something to him. Richard closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. If I agree to compensation, could you say a few good words for me? I tilted my head slightly. Are you asking me for a favor? He gave a weak smile. You were my wife. I was silent. In that moment, 7 years of memories flooded my mind. The parties I hosted for him, the expenses I managed for him, the nights he lectured me on life, and I just listened quietly. I let it all go and said, I cannot do that, because you were my husband. The meeting ended after an hour without any agreement. As everyone was getting up, Richard stopped me at the door. Eleanor, he said quietly, I know I was wrong, but you did not have to go this far. You are mistaken. I replied, I did not go too far. I just stopped at the right time. You did not give me a chance. I gave you 8 years. He was silent. I walked past him without looking back. As I left the building, I felt a sense of lightness, not because I had won, but because the last thread had been cut. That afternoon, I met with Marcus Thorne as scheduled. He listened to my story and nodded. The mediation failing is a good thing, he said. The paperwork will be processed faster. I just hope everything gets resolved smoothly, he replied. But what will I do after that? I thought for a moment. I want to work. Where? A place where I can write down what I know without having to hide anything. Marcus Thorne smiled. I have a proposal. He handed me a job description. Nothing special, just a risk analysis consultant position. Consider it, he said. I took the document. My mind was completely clear. That night, I returned to the apartment and opened the window to let the breeze in. Sarah looked at me. What happened? One part is over. Sad. I shook my head. A little regretful. Not for him, but for myself, for being silent for so long. Sarah simply poured me more tea. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote slowly. The face-to-face meeting is complete. No more emotional ties. I underlined it and closed the notebook. Outside, the city was still bright with lights, life went on, and I was moving on to a different stage. The few days after the mediation passed at a completely different rhythm. No more urgent calls, no more half-threatening, half-pleading texts. This time, the silence was not a scary void, but the quiet hum of a machine running on its own. The papers left my hands and went straight down a cold legal path. I just had to watch. There was no need to push them. I started my new job as suggested by Marcus Thorne. There was no welcome party, no loud celebrations, just a small desk, a large monitor, and a stack of reports. I loved the simplicity. It allowed me to focus on what I did best, reading numbers and listening to the stories behind them. On the first morning, I arrived early. The office was still empty. I turned on my computer and went through a risk analysis document for a project under review. I read it very slowly, underlining any inconsistencies and making notes for Yeop. No one knew how I had worked in the kitchen under a yellow light while Richard slept. It was enough that I knew. The train stopped at Marcus's station on the way. "Are you getting used to the work?" "Very familiar." He nodded without asking further questions. I liked the way he kept his distance. No one here needed my past. They wanted results. At lunchtime, I received a call from Lawyer Davis. "There is an update," he said. "The other side has requested a change to some terms in the document. It is not serious. But it seems like a stalling tactic. The chances of success are low. I trust you, lawyer. Let me know if there are any developments." I hung up and returned to the screen. Work helped me focus my mind. It helped me stay grounded. In the afternoon, Sarah texted me. She said she was under a lot of pressure. My acquaintances were asking about me. "How did you respond?" "My sister said she is working and has nothing to do with this." Good. At this point, I knew public opinion would start to split. Some would side with me, some would sympathize with Richard, and some would just be curious. I did not have to get involved in this. Silence was the best shield I had. That night, I returned to the apartment and prepared a simple meal. I ate slowly, listening to the sound of boiling water, the knife hitting the cutting board, and the very ordinary sounds. I realized it had been a long time since I had cooked for myself with such a peaceful mind. Before, meals were always tied to responsibility and judgment. Not anymore. After dinner, I called my mother. I started working. "Is the job okay?" "I am fine. Take care of your health." "Yes." I hung up the phone and stood in the waiting room. Cars passed by on the street. I no longer felt like I had to hide. I could stand anywhere with my name and my job. Over the next few days, my daily routine gradually stabilized. I went to work in the morning, came home in the afternoon, and read books or took notes in the evening. I no longer checked the news frequently. If anything important happened, my lawyer or Marcus Thorne would let me know. One afternoon, Marcus called me into his office. "I have a job for you," he said. "I want you to join the official review team for the next project." "What should I prepare?" "Just do what you have been doing." I nodded. I did not ask why he trusted me. This trust did not come from the divorce story, but from the analysis report I had submitted. That night, I received a text from a familiar phone number. It was Richard. "I am about to be tried." I stared at the message without any emotion. "I just wanted to let you know," so I put the phone down. I did not reply. A late notice was no longer effective. The next morning, I was invited to an internal meeting. It was a complex and risky project. I gave a brief presentation and pointed out the points to be careful about. The room was silent. Marcus Thorne nodded. "This opinion will be included in the final report," he said. The meeting ended. A young colleague smiled at me. "Your explanation was very clear." "Thank you." It was the first time I was publicly recognized for my ability, not for my role in relation to someone else. That afternoon, Lawyer Davis called. "The trial date has been set." "When?" "Next week." "Do I need to be present?" "Yes, but it will be very short. I understand. I hung up and continued working. I did not let my emotions get in the way. I had learned that, the night before the trial, I did not sleep well. I organized my documents and prepared my clothes. I did not expect anything. I just wanted everything to go smoothly. The next morning, I went to the courthouse with my lawyer. The corridors were long and the lights were white. Richard was sitting on the bench opposite me. He looked at me. His eyes looked tired. I nodded very politely to greet him. The trial was quick, as expected. The documents were clear. The evidence was sufficient. When the judge read the verdict, I listened to every word with absolute clarity. Not because it decided someone's fate, but because it confirmed that what I had gone through was not a fantasy. As I was leaving the courtroom, Richard called me. "Eleanor," I said, pausing for a moment. "I am sorry." I looked at him. This apology came late, but it was not meaningless. It was just that it was no longer effective. "I accept," I said, "but I am not coming back." He nodded without saying anything else. I stepped outside. The weather was clear. I took a deep breath. There was no applause, no dramatic moment, just an ending that had found its place. In the afternoon, I returned to the office and continued working. Marcus Thorne looked at me and said briefly, "Congratulations, thank you." In the evening, I went home and opened my notebook. I wrote the last line of Phase 2, legal proceedings complete. Start a new life. I underlined the line and closed the book. Outside, the city lights came on. I was no longer standing on the edge. I was walking in on my own 2 feet. After the trial, I did not rest immediately. I knew one thing. When the door of the law closes, the door of real life opens, and that is when it is easiest to lose one's rhythm. I returned to the office as usual. The numbers on the screen remained cold and objective, regardless of what I had been through. I liked that. Marcus gave me a new file, one more difficult and complex. At first glance, it seemed like a promising project. The expected returns were high, the partners were all well known, and the press was full of praise. I read every line carefully and quickly found the small weaknesses that, if not addressed, would lead to a breakdown. I made notes and sent my feedback. Marcus replied briefly, "You hit the nail on the head. I had lunch with my colleagues." For the first time, I participated in a general conversation without feeling like an outsider. They asked for my opinion on risk. I answered appropriately. No one asked about my previous marriage. Perhaps they knew, but chose not to pry. That respect made me feel at home. That afternoon, I went to the bank with my lawyer to finalize the last of the paperwork regarding my parents' estate. When the bank clerk stamped the final document, I let out a small sigh of relief. A weight that had been on my shoulders was finally lifted. I called my father. "It is all over now." His voice on the other end of the line softened. "Good. Now, live for yourself." I hung up and stood in front of the bank's glass doors, watching the people come and go. Countless lives brushing past each other, each one fighting a battle no one else could see. In the evening, I returned to my newly rented apartment. It was not large, but it was bright and quiet. I unpacked and organized every corner. The act of putting things back in their place felt like I was organizing myself. I hung a small, simple painting. I did not need much. That night, I had a strange dream. I was in the old kitchen of the old house, but no one was there. No voices, no watchful eyes. I woke up and realized I was no longer afraid of the memories. They were now a part of me, not a chain. In the following days, I became busier. It was a good kind of busy. I began to lead small analyses and took a less consultative role in meetings. I did not speak much, but when I did, I was precise. Marcus noticed. One afternoon, he called me into his office. "Have you ever thought about going further?" "Further?" "Taking on a more proactive leadership role with the team." I was silent for a few. "Take your time. Do not rush," he said. "I just wanted you to know we are watching." I left his office. My mind was completely at peace. The recognition was coming at the right time. Not too soon, not too late. Over the weekend, Sarah came to visit. We cooked and talked together. She smiled at me. "You have changed, Elle. You seem lighter." "It is because I am not fighting anymore. I am not afraid that everything will fall apart again one day. It could all fall apart," I said. But this time, I know I can get back up. I went for a walk alone in the evening. The city lights were on, and the wind was cool. I saw restaurants bustling with people, small families, young couples. I did not compare. I simply observed. Everyone had their own rhythm, and I was finding mine. A text came from an unknown number. I opened it. Eleanor, I am going abroad for a while. It is Richard. I just wanted to say goodbye. I stared at the screen and thought for a long time. Then, for the first time in months, I replied, I hope you find what you are looking for. That was it. Nothing more. Nothing less. I put the phone down. I felt another door close. The next morning, I arrived at work early. I opened a report and started a new day. Nothing was holding me back. The future was still uncertain, but I no longer felt daunted by it. That evening, Marcus Thorne emailed me. Prepare the next quarterly report. I want your name on it as a co-author. I read the sentence over and over again. A co-author, not an assistant or a ghostwriter. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote another line. I am no longer living to endure, but to build. I underlined it and closed the book. Outside, it was completely quiet. I sat by the window, sipping my tea, letting the silence seep into every breath. I did not know what the future held, but I knew I would keep walking on feet that had once trembled but had never given way. I stepped into the new quarter with a completely different mindset. I was no longer an outsider, someone who had to prove herself. I was part of the team, and more importantly, someone who knew how to bear responsibility. Marcus assigned me to lead the risk analysis of a large-scale infrastructure project in the Midwest. The sheer scale of it was daunting. It was large, long-term, and involved numerous stakeholders. I knew this was not just a professional challenge, but a test of my courage. My team was on a mission. The youngest member was 26, the oldest 33. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and a hint of skepticism in our first meeting. I did not give a long introduction. I simply said, we work with data and accountability, not emotion. The atmosphere in the room immediately shifted. I assigned tasks, listened to their opinions, and asked questions. I did not force them. I guided them to look at the problem from different angles. When the meeting ended, I knew I had chosen the right approach. In the following days, I worked harder than usual. Not because I was forced to, but in a virtuous cycle. I stayed up late reading reports, checking every assumption, every number. Sometimes I was tired, but it was not the exhaustion of perseverance, but the pleasant fatigue of a builder. One afternoon, while I was reviewing an analysis report, Marcus stopped by. Are you comfortable in your new role? I asked. I still have a lot to learn. That is a good answer. He looked at the draft on my screen. What do you see as the biggest risk? Not financial, I replied, but management. If we do not control the intertwined interests, everything will slip through our fingers. Marcus nodded. Exactly. Keep going in this direction. I realized that trust was being built little by little, not with words, but with actions. Meanwhile, my personal life was gradually stabilizing. I got used to the small apartment and the quiet evenings. I no longer checked my phone every time I got a strange message. I no longer flinched at the familiar backs of people on the street. My body was learning to relax again. One weekend evening, I went to my parents' house. We had a simple dinner, spicy fish stew and pickled vegetables. My father asked about my work, my mother asked about my meals. No one mentioned Richard. The silence was a gift. After dinner, I sat on the canopy and listened to the sound of insects. My father poured me some tea and said slowly, "You are doing well." I looked at him. I just did what I had to do. Not everyone has that kind of courage. I did not reply. Courage is sometimes just a choice. Do I suffer once, or do I suffer for a long time? Back in the city, I was invited to a professional seminar. Marcus suggested that I present a small part of his presentation. I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. Talking about risk and management in front of a crowd was something I used to do quietly. Now, I was doing it in public. On the day of the seminar, I stepped onto the stage in a simple outfit, my heart beating steadily. I did not say much. I spoke clearly. I gave examples, analyzed them, and concluded. When my presentation was over, the room was silent for a few seconds before breaking into applause. The applause was not loud, but it was enough. Afterwards, a middle-aged man approached and offered to shake my hand. The presentation was very practical. "Thank you. I would love to collaborate if I have the chance." I nodded. New doors were opening, slowly but surely. I came home very late that night. I sat by the window and opened my notebook. I was no longer writing about Richard. Now, the lines were about work, direction, and the things I wanted to learn. I realized that when people do not look back at the past, they naturally move forward faster. A week later, I received a call from Lawyer Davis. "The illusion has been completely shattered. Thank you. Do you want to hear from the other side?" "No, that is okay." The lawyer was silent for a moment. "You are one of the few people I have ever met who can walk away from a case without any resentment." I smiled. The burden was too heavy. After hanging up, I felt like a circle had been torn apart. Not because I had won the case, but because I was no longer being dragged along. At the office, my team had completed the first report. I sent it to management. Marcus replied the same day. "Good report. We will proceed as recommended." I read the email. My mind was completely at peace. That night, Sarah called. "Sis, you have been so busy lately." "Yeah, but you seem happier." "Yeah. You are not thinking about anything else?" I thought for a moment. "Not about work. I am still learning to live fully on my own." Sarah smiled. "That is enough." I put the phone down, turned off the lights, and lay down on the bed. I did not need to fill the void with anyone. I was filling it myself. Before falling asleep, I reopened my notebook and wrote a short line. "It is starting to become the center of my life." I underlined it and closed the book. Outside, the city was slowly sinking into the night. I closed my eyes and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. One morning, when I woke up and my first instinct was not to check my phone, I knew I had come a long way. Sunlight streamed into the small apartment, and a gentle breeze stirred the curtains. I listened to the sound of the kettle boiling. Everything was slow, rhythmic. There was no waiting for bad news. No fear lurking behind every sound. That feeling was more precious than any victory. The project was nearing its final stages. The Midwest project needed a final decision. I continued to go over the details with the team. The meetings were long, and the data tables piled up. I was no longer standing behind anyone. I stood in front of the whiteboard, pointing out the risks. When there were objections, I listened and countered with data. I did not need to raise my voice. I let the numbers do the talking. One late afternoon, Marcus asked me to stay after work. The meeting room was empty, the light soft. He looked at me for a long time. "Are you ready for the next step?" "What step?" "To take on more responsibility, to officially lead the project." I was silent, not because I was hesitant, but because I knew this answer would change everything. "I am ready," I said. Marcus nodded. "Then, starting next week, you will be the team lead." I stood up and bowed my head slightly. "Thank you." "You do not need to thank me. You earned it." Leaving the meeting room, I walked very slowly. The image of myself 8 years ago flashed in my mind. A woman standing in a kitchen, accounting for grocery money and hiding loose change in her pocket. I no longer resented that past. Without those years, I would not be who I am today. That weekend, I went to visit my parents in the countryside. This time, I did not bring any worries with me. I brought peace. My father was fixing the fence, and my mother was planting a few more pots. I helped her water the plants and listen to the neighborhood stories, small stories that had nothing to do with money or fame. I suddenly realized that happiness sometimes, just being where you belong, was enough. That night, my father asked me, "Are you thinking about coming home?" "I am thinking about it." "Do not rush. You just need a place to come back to." I nodded. "I will be back."